Hi everyone, welcome back to Learn With Me. I'm Deborah Hanson, and today we're going to be looking at AP Psychology 5.4, Selection of Categories of Psychological Disorders. For this section of Unit 5, there are 10 CED questions. Yep, 10, that's what I said. So this is part 7, so there's going to be 10 separate videos, one for each question. This video is about CED question number 7. So here's a list of all the key terms that you need to know for 5.4. This is all the CED questions all together, so it's just a really long list, so it's not exactly just for this section or this CED question that we're talking about today. There is a separate video for all the key terms with the definition and real life example, because as I always say, the key to the 5 are the key terms. Knowing your key terms and applying them on test day is really essential to getting that 5. So before we get started on the CED question, thanks to everybody who's already subscribed and hit the like button on all my videos and the comments and the emails. Thank you so much to all of you. I really appreciate it. And it really does sort of inspire me to do more videos. And I'm really happy that you're finding these helpful. So if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button for me. I really appreciate it. It's really great to see all the numbers go up. Okay, so for this section of the 5.4 question number 7 is describe the symptoms and possible causes of selective dissociative disorders. So let's break all that down. I always like to start with a little overview as to what we're going to be talking about in the video. So we're going to talk about, first of all, the definition of dissociative disorders. I really have a hard time saying that one. Anyway, dissociative disorders involve disruptions in consciousness, memory, identity, perception, or behavior. And they're often associated with the experience of trauma or significant stress. For AP psychology, you need to know 2 types of the disorders. You need dissociative amnesia with or without fugue, and dissociative identity disorder, which is DID. We're going to break those down with all the causes, symptoms, everything you need to know to do well on the AP exam. So first, we're going to talk about dissociative amnesia, a psychological disorder where a person loses memory of important personal information, usually after experiencing trauma or severe stress. Unlike regular forgetfulness, this is not caused by brain injury, but the mind's way of coping with overwhelming distress. So let's look at definitions and symptoms. Dissociative amnesia has different forms depending on the extent of memory loss. We're going to go over all of them. The first one is localized amnesia. This means the person forgets everything that happened during a specific time period, often related to a traumatic event. So for example, a person might not remember anything from the day of a car accident. The next one is selective amnesia. This is when someone remembers some but not all details of a distressing event. For instance, a soldier may recall parts of their deployment but have no memory of combat experience. The next one is generalized amnesia. This is rare but very severe, where a person forgets their entire life history, including their name, family, and past. So imagine waking up one day with no idea of who you are or where you came from. The last one is dissociative amnesia with fugue. This is one of the most extreme cases where a person not only forgets their identity, but also travels to a new place, sometimes even adopting a new name and a personality. So an example would be someone who, after surviving a natural disaster, leaves their home, travels to another city, and starts a new life without realizing they've actually lost their memory. So let's look at some of the causes of dissociative amnesia. The most common trigger is severe trauma or psychological stress, such as abuse, physical, emotional, or sexual, war or combat experience, natural disasters or accidents, extreme personal loss, or overwhelming stress. The mind essentially blocks out these painful memories as a defense mechanism to protect the person from emotional distress. So dissociative amnesia is a fascinating but serious condition where the brain disconnects from painful memories to cope with trauma. While some cases resolve on their own, often require therapy to help with the person to recover their identity and past experiences. So understanding this disorder helps us to see how powerful the human mind can be when we're dealing with stress. Now we're going to talk about dissociative identity disorder, which is DID. Sometimes you may have heard this called like split personality. That's sort of the old terminology. Now they refer to it as dissociative identity disorder. So it's a complex psychological condition where a person has 2 or more distinct personality states, often called alters. These alters take control of the behavior at different times, and the person may not even remember what happens during these transitions. Let's look at the definition and symptoms. So DID is more than just mood swings. It involves a complete shift in personality, memory, and behavior. Let's break down some of the key symptoms. So the first one is disruptions in identity. A person may shift between personalities, each with unique traits, ages, or even genders. For example, one alter may be calm and logical, while another is aggressive and impulsive. The next one is memory gaps. Individuals often forget important personal information or daily events, sometimes not recognizing that these things have already been done. So for instance, someone might wake up in a different place with no memory of how they got there. And the last one is emotional distress and detachment. Many people with DID feel disconnected from themselves or experience extreme emotional shifts. So, for example, imagine a person who normally has a reserved and quiet personality, but suddenly switches to an outgoing, assertive alter with no memory of what happened during the transition. The switch can happen in response to stress or triggers related to past trauma. So let's look at some of the possible causes. One of the most common causes of DID is severe and repeated childhood trauma, such as physical or sexual abuse at a young age, extreme psychological stress that overwhelms normal coping mechanisms. So we also have to ask ourselves, like, why does this happen? Also, the mind creates separate identities or alters to cope with overwhelming trauma, allowing the person to detach themselves from painful experiences. DID is a fascinating but challenging disorder that shows how the mind adapts to extreme stress. While it may seem dramatic, it's actually a psychological defense mechanism developed for people to survive trauma. With therapy, individuals with DID can learn to manage their symptoms and integrate their identities. So on the slide, you're going to see that I just made you a little chart so you can see the differences between the dissociative amnesia and DID, the core issues, the association with trauma, the memory gaps, and the unique features, hopefully to help you be able to sort of compartmentalize those in your mind. Dissociative disorders are complex conditions where a person disconnects from their thoughts, their memories, their identity, or emotions, often as a way to cope with distress. But what actually causes dissociative disorders? Well, let's explore that into three major factors that contribute to their development. We're going to start first with trauma. That's the primary cause. So what happens? Most cases of dissociative disorders are linked to severe trauma, especially in childhood. The brain creates a mental escape when faced with overwhelming pain. This is known as psychological defense mechanism. Instead of processing the trauma, the mind compartmentalizes it. For example, a child who endures long-term physical abuse may develop DID, or dissociative identity disorder, where different personality states take over to handle the distress. Or, for example, a survivor of sexual abuse may experience dissociative amnesia, where they cannot recall traumatic events. So the key takeaway is that trauma rewires the brain's coping mechanisms, making dissociation a survival strategy. The second one we're going to look at is stress. This is a trigger for dissociation. So extreme psychological stress from significant life events can also induce dissociative states. Unlike trauma-based dissociation, stress-related dissociation is usually temporary, but can develop into a disorder if it's prolonged. So for example, soldiers in combat zones may dissociate as a way to emotionally detach from the violence, or survivors of natural disasters sometimes experience dissociative fugue, where they wander away and just forget their identity. So the key takeaway for that one is that intense stress, even without direct trauma, can trigger dissociation as a defense mechanism. And the last one we're going to look at is cognitive and emotional mechanisms, how the brain handles trauma. So the brain compartmentalizes traumatic memories, preventing them from fully entering our conscious awareness. And so people may experience emotional numbing when they detach from their emotions to avoid the psychological pain. So for example, someone who experiences childhood neglect might develop depersonalization disorder, feeling disconnected from their body or reality. Or a person who lives through a war or domestic violence might unconsciously suppress memories, leading to dissociative amnesia. So the mind creates these barriers around painful experiences, which can lead to these dissociative symptoms. So dissociative disorders aren't just random memory issues. They're a response to severe trauma, overwhelming stress, and cognitive coping mechanisms. The brain uses dissociation as a way to protect itself, but when it becomes a long-term pattern, it can really disrupt our daily life. So understanding these causes helps us better support those experiencing these dissociative symptoms. So just to wrap it all up, just a few key takeaways for you to prepare for the exam. You need to understand the symptoms and differences between dissociative amnesia and DID. You need to be able to explain how trauma and stress contribute to dissociation, and you need to be able to use examples to illustrate symptoms and causes of both disorders. So that's all the essential knowledge you need to know to answer CED question number 7. Describe the symptoms and possible causes of selective dissociative disorders. If you found that helpful, please hit that subscribe button and like button and leave me some comments, send me an email. I don't care. It's really nice to hear from all of you, and I love hearing how you're doing in your journey along this AP psychology preparation for the AP exam. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.